Hi, I'm Derek Ashang. Welcome to the stream. This is your show. It's a show that does stories that the audience wants to cover, and we source them globally. As always, we bring you things that are sourced primarily via social media, and today we've got an important one. As calls for aid to Somalia continue to grow, how much of that money is actually getting to people in need? Our digital producer, Ahmed Shahabaldin, is here with us looking out for your daily feedback as always. And with him on the couch is Jeremy Scahill, who's an award-winning journalist and the author of the best-selling book, Blackwater, The Rise of the World's Most Powerful Mercenary Army. He's also a reporter for The Nation, a weekly U.S. magazine. Jeremy, you just got back from Somalia. Tell us some of what you saw.
Well, I mean, I've never seen anything like Mogadishu before. The second that you step out of the airport, you see the war, you see the suffering of the people. We traveled a lot with some warlords and militia leaders and went to the front lines where the U.S.-backed African Union forces are fighting against the Islamic militant movement, the Shabab. And we saw whole communities of people that had been displaced by the fighting, and all that was left there were animals chewing trash, the smell of flesh, rotten flesh in the air. We saw decapitated bodies in the streets. This is the backdrop to the story that's playing out now about famine and drought there. But you take what would already be a horrifying situation on a humanitarian level and then add to it 20 years of civil war and the U.S. increasingly engaged in targeted killing campaigns inside of Somalia. One of the things that I revealed there was that the CIA is operating a secret counterterrorism base at the airport, and we saw it right when we flew in. I mean, it was the worst kept secret in Mogadishu. The kids chewing cod on the street. We're like, oh, did you see the new CIA building over there?
You know, this is so fascinating because you broke this story like maybe 2 weeks ago, and that was a really great piece that you wrote. And I think a lot of the American people are not aware of these kinds of operations, even though they may be apparent to people on the ground in Somalia.
Right, and President Obama, one of the first things he did when he took office was to issue a series of executive orders that were aimed at dismantling the Bush-era torture apparatus. And what I found on the ground in Mogadishu was that the U.S. is involved with an underground prison in the basement of Somalia's National Security Agency, where people that have been rendered from Kenya and taken to this underground prison are interrogated by the CIA. And the underground prison there's no access for the prisoners to the outside world, no access to lawyers, the Red Cross, or even daylight. It's infested with bed bugs, and they're being interrogated there by CIA and French intelligence.
See, I think this is really intriguing because there was a big dialogue around Guantanamo and if these enhanced interrogation techniques, quote unquote, are actually viable. I don't know if we don't know if they're viable and they work at Guantanamo, then how much less in Somalia?
But I mean, the bigger issue is, President Obama said he was going to end this practice of using these secret prisons in rendition. I mean, to me, this should be a real scandal in the United States because it calls into question the credibility of the president's own executive orders that said, that were aimed at banning this. But no one cares at all in the Congress about this. And furthermore, almost no one cares about Somalia. Africa, famine is Africa. Warlords is Africa. No one wants to talk about why this situation is as bad as it is right now. And it's not just because it hasn't rained in Somalia in a long time.
So this is something that I really want to bring in as we get deeper into the Somalia issue, which is what are the underpinnings of it? Because there's obviously a lot of things that are at play here. You've got internal conflict, you've got a government that's been displaced, you've got people that are displaced, you do have a famine, and that's obviously having potentially destabilizing effects in some of the regional powers as well. But the thing that I think doesn't get discussed is how these things are intertwined, and I'm really interested to get some more of your thoughts on that. Let's jump right into it. We know that Somalis continue to pour into refugee camps in neighboring Kenya and Ethiopia. They've been fleeing from civil war and famine that is threatening more than 12 million people. With very little aid actually getting into the country, Somalis have been traveling on foot for weeks at a time just to reach these camps. The journey was documented in a film, Dadaab, Get There or Die Trying, which was made by a group of young Somali filmmakers to raise funds for the Survival Packs campaign. It's an online initiative that provides Somali refugees with packs that include a blanket, a water flask, and shoes. We're going to try to play you a quick clip from that film.
wixii wax u harayna waa hareen wixii aan waxba u harayna waa soo dhaqaaqaya wax soo dhaqaaqaya wax soo dhaqaaqi rabbi
meeqa ilmaa lasoo qaxday
waxaa la soo qaxay 6 ilmaha hadda lama aqoon kuwa kala dhaxdan u sabtay gaariga wax ii jiidi waaye.
Many are finding that the conditions at the Dadaab and other refugee camps are actually worse than those conditions that they left behind. Some are even choosing to go back to Somalia. Overpopulation and a lack of resources at the camps, critics are questioning where the vast amounts of aid money is going. There are concerns about the efficiency of aid organizations that have been tasked with providing relief to Somalis. This is the topic we want to cover today, and joining us to discuss these issues are two excellent guests. We've got joining us well-known Somali singer and poet, Kenan, and also joining us from Nairobi is Ahmed Farah, who's one of the producers of the film Dadaab, which you just saw a clip from. He's also the co-founder of Global Somali Response. Welcome both of you to the stream. Thanks so much for being with us. Kenan, let's begin with you. You are a Somali. You left your home some years ago. What is at the root of the kind of instability that we've seen plaguing this nation for over 20 years now?
Oh, I mean, that's a big question. There's the, we would need a few programs to even touch on that topic. I think we have a lot of responsibility to shoulder as Somali people and as African people in general. We are having problems that are not 21st century problems at the moment. And these are, but we live in this generation. And this is the gap that we are responsible to mend at the moment. And Somalia has fallen into that gap. And we're dealing with people who have nothing to eat, no water to drink, and who have no authority to go to, and that the world has turned their back on. And so as Somalis, I think it's time for us to take responsibility and to step up.
So let me actually, on that point, let's go to Ahmed. You know, you've been on the ground, you've been seeing some of what's been happening. Is aid actually reaching the people that you were seeing in the refugee camps?
Let me start with something that Kenan said before, like how come they only fix the bridge when there's somebody else already fallen? What's going on right now is they trying to fix the bridge after somebody has fallen. What's going on in the refugees has been going a while ago. What's going on right now in Somalia, people who are fleeing right now, it's been years and years. It's not something just started just right now or just months ago. It's been years. That's what's going on.
So we have a tweet from Mina Abdi, and she's saying it's not just humanitarian aid, it's also corruption within the Somali government. Money that they get from the international community is misused. I know you were able to travel in Somalia and Mogadishu. How come aid can't?
Well, I mean, this is what I think should be one of the major scandals here, and Kenan sort of alluded to it. The fact is that millions and millions of dollars are spent every week on Somalia, but it's not going to help people that are in Mogadishu or other areas. It goes to support the Somalia industrial complex in Kenya or Ethiopia or Uganda, where the militaries and the governments of these countries use the instability in Somalia to justify increased counterterrorism funding. And then the Kenyan government, there's a tremendous amount of profiteering that goes on off of the suffering of people in Dadaab. In this refugee camp in Dadaab, and I was down there, it was built for 90,000 people, but there are 400,000 people or so that are living in the camp, and then tens of thousands of others on the outskirts. Kenya is making a lot of money off of this stuff. The World Food Program, a couple of years, the United Nations said that half of the money being spent on Somalia by the World Food Program was being used to pay off warlords or was being taken by contractors, the kinds of contractors that have profited off of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. So, we can talk about the Somali government's corruption, and there's no doubt that that is a corrupt government, but these guys are stealing pennies compared to what these international aid organizations are making off of Somalia without ever leaving the airport or the little green zone called Villa Somalia where the government is housed. These guys just hide at the airport. There's no aid organizations. It's like Kenan says in one of his songs, I don't see doctors, I see nurses. There's no doctors there.
Well, I mean, part of the issue is basically you've got a ton of money going in and you don't have any kind of accountability necessarily. And as was alluded to by both Kenan and Ahmed, this is not a recent crisis. I mean, right after the sort of devolution of the Somali government in 91, you had a famine then, but you've had all kinds of ongoing struggles. And we've been seeing articles every year talking about, money coming from the World Food Program, for example, that doesn't necessarily wind up getting to the people. There was one article I was reading earlier today that was specifically speaking about a couple of contractors that were there for the trucking to actually send food in. And one of them was found to actually be waylaying his own trucks so that he could resell the food. And Kanan, I want to bring this back to you. When you're an artist, I know that you've done a lot of work in trying to raise people's awareness about what goes on in Somalia. But if people are being asked, for example, as now, to give aid to the country, and that aid is not getting there, isn't that just dealing with the Band-Aid issue? What do you think needs to be done or can be done to actually address the core problems that are facing the country?
Actually, I'm so glad you brought that back to me, because I wanted to jump in and just explain that there are two issues we're dealing with here. They're mainly a psychological problem. The world has found that Somalia is a difficult place, and there's some kind of a psychological stamp put on the concept of Somalia, and so, to be honest, not enough at all of the aid that is proposed has even been given to Somalia. So we can't talk about what is being used in the right way or not being used in the right way when half of what is proposed has not gotten off the ground. And this is the responsibility of big governments who have proposed this. There's $1 billion gap at the moment. That's not a small thing. I mean, when you have a gap of that nature, the boy on the ground is going to want to save something for his auntie, because it's just not enough getting to the people. I don't think that this is an intrinsic problem, that we have a problem of intrinsic corruption and that we can't, we don't do for our own and we don't share with our own. It's just there's a problem with the resources. There's not enough of it at the moment.
Now, Ahmed, let me take it to you, because you've been on the ground in Dadaab, as we mentioned before, and they're saying that UN is estimating 1,400 Somalis are entering the refugee camp every day. Can you speak to those numbers?
This the thing. Right now, people are raising money, $1 billion. What they have money is building a prison. The Dadaab is a prison. Sorry to say that word, fucking. It's a prison. So the world is raising $1 billion to sustain a prison. The people who are coming to the camp, the 1,400, they mention it, is not what it is. The people who've been there, some of the people, they've been telling us, they've been there for a couple of months. So when people are coming from Somalia to come to the camp, they get on the line. They get on the line. Because the UNHCR tell them, if you have a relative in the camp, go and stay with the relative you have. So they've been there a couple of months ago. So now new refugees are coming. They queue on the line so that they can be registered. The refugee camp, there are a lot of UNHCR people working on there, but they don't have the capacity. Even though they're raising money to sustain the people who are coming to the camp, they have not the manpower to register all these people. So what they do is like sending people to relatives. And the same people are the ones who are coming now in the road. Because we've been to the Dadaab, we've been to Liboya, we've been to the border. We haven't seen that much more people coming to the camp. There are hundreds, 200, 300, but there's no way 1,500 people are coming. The people who are coming now, the UNHCR are mentioning, are those who've been in the camp a while ago.
Now, why do you think there's the discrepancy then between those numbers?
It is right now, the UNHCR need, in a way, money. I have no idea where that money is going. There are some kind of misadministration. There's something going on there. We don't know what it is. This famine, it is some way true, but at the same time, it's not. We've been there. I've been there in the camp for almost 2 years. I've been reporting there. I've done a couple of documentaries in there. But the thing that's going on right now is not people who are coming right now. There are people coming, but it's not people who are right now coming massive to the camp. They've been there for a while. A lady we've been interviewed, yes?
Go ahead, continue your thought.
A lady we've been interviewed, she said, I've been here for 2 years. I still don't have a shelter. All I get is a ration card. So this is what happens when people come to the camp. They distribute food twice in a month. So if you come 2 days later, you have to wait for 14 days or 13 days you have to wait.
Ahmed,
So imagine someone who walked from the dam, came to the camp, walking for 95 kilometers and heading from the UNHCR to wait for 2 weeks. Imagine that.
There's a common refrain that we often hear, that there's fear that aid money that's sent to Somalia will go to Al-Shabaab. And then we see this tweet coming in from Noon Arabia saying Saudi Arabia donated $1 billion to Jordan's economy today, but only donated 60 million to Somalia. So the question is just generally, Jeremy and maybe Ahmed or Kenan, is there too much emphasis on foreign aid as opposed to Somalis, on international aid?
Well, the real aid that the Somalis need to be given and are in fact mobilized and are right now exercising is that of their energy, that of their support, that of their leadership. And I think that if you see what is happening on the ground in all of these diaspora communities from Minnesota to Toronto to a lot of European countries, the young Somali people have banded, have created many organizations, have been going door to door, collecting money from their own people. Anything from selling food at parks to gathering, kind of a wider response from their local governments. Somali people have stepped up and are doing everything that they can at the moment to solve this problem. I don't want to kind of focus just on the negative of what is happening, because what we then risk doing is turn off the world from actively pursuing a better future for the people of Somalia. I want to focus on the positive, and I know that there's a lot of positive that is going to come from this, because in the very least, the Somali mentality has now turned and the Somali leadership has now stepped up, and we are taking the leadership in fixing this problem. We need the world's help. We need the support of our brothers and sisters all over the world to get us to have the fuel to efficiently move. And I don't think that it is a matter of just a corrupt problem of funds not going to the right place. I do think that the problem is that great, and I do think that we need to address the problem in Somalia rather than just outside of Somalia.
So to that point, Jeremy, we spoke a little bit actually before the program came on about this issue of how external forces are playing a role on the ground there. And we know that the Somali Prime Minister was recently forced out of office. A lot of Somalis were not happy about it. What role are neighboring countries and the West playing in either helping or hurting this idea of Somali agency?
I think a lot of Somalis feel that the United States and Uganda in particular, which is the leading country in the African Union force there, that they're actually making decisions for Somalia, and that the country isn't permitted to have any sort of sovereignty or anything resembling sovereignty. On the issue, though, of the role of the international community, to me, the premier issue for people in the United States to take up with their own government is how our counterterrorism policies actually destabilize Somalia and help the very forces we claim to be fighting, the Shabaab, benefit from our military campaign inside of Somalia because they can use it as propaganda. And also, the Shabaab are largely Somali people themselves. And I think that if we as a nation in the United States engage in collective humiliation of the Somali people, we're going to keep this kind of destabilization the norm. And in order to have a long-standing peace in Somalia, you have to allow Somalis to take the political lead on it. And if that comes in the form of a government that's Islamic in a pronounced way, and that's what Somali people want, that's their right. We don't have a right to overthrow governments. And so our response should be one of aid, but also one of saying, let's stop exacerbating the problem by getting deeper involved militarily in Somalia. It's very disastrous.
So I want to press on that issue and actually, Ahmed, get you involved in this because, so let's say that the U.S. steps back, maybe the West steps back on some of this counterterrorism efforts. But the problems in Somalia, as we mentioned before, have been there for a long time. There have been people in refugee camps for 20 years. I mean, let's say that these countries do mitigate their activity, is that actually going to help? Or is there something more fundamentally wrong that is not being addressed?
There is nothing positive about dying people. The thing is, international community, they don't oversee the situation. The international community have money, and whenever there's an emergency, they're there. ONU is raising money. A lot of people are raising money. But the thing is, the Somali community need to step up, come with a solution. If the international community had a solution, they would have come up a long time ago, 20 years. This is a problem for the Somali community. The youth, right now, you see them waving flags. You see them wearing T-shirts with a Somali flag. They want to see something to be proud of. But there's nothing to be proud of. The country is dying. The people are dying. Whenever you see television, whenever you see any program on TV, there is a dying mom, crying baby, and starvation. What is it to be proud of? How can I wave a flag? How can I wear a T-shirt of Somali? Well, there's nothing to be proud of. The thing is, like the new generation, they want to do something. They don't know what. The international community have nothing to do, nothing to say. All they can do is just provide some money and fill up the pocket of the UNHCR, who are building a prison in the Dab.
Kenan, your thoughts?
I would like to get into that. I mean, I don't think that this is an issue of Somalis being proud for the wrong reasons or looking for pride. I think this is the restoration of dignity that we're looking for. We're not interested in the concept of being ashamed or being proud. What we're looking for is twofold: saving lives, but not just that, saving our own lives. This is an African problem, and we have a chance now to create a new African legacy. We do not require the concept of the Messiah. We do not, we cannot put all our problems on and all of our solutions into the NGOs on the ground or even the governments. What we need as Somali people is in fact to create a spiritual kind of response to the entire thing. And I think that that is in fact happening, and that is something that is helping to restore the dignity of Somali people. I have not seen young Somalis mobilize themselves as well as they're doing now, ever. I have not seen it when all of the destruction of the past has happened. I think something has turned, and I think that that is a great thing to focus on. And I think that the world's help right now is absolutely necessary, because no matter what we say, there are 11 some odd million people right now at risk of this. And we have a chance to create a new legacy, both from the relationship that the world has with Somalia and with the way that Somalis relate to us.
I want to ask you just one question that came in from our community. On the topic of mobilization, which you're talking about, you've performed with Bono, and obviously you must think that conscious hip-hop can play a role in this, but Nathan Collette is saying, question for Kenan, will you come to Dadaab?
Yes, actually, I will. I am, and Jeremy knows that.
Great.
All right. So on that note, I want to ask the both of you to stay with us for just a second, because we're going to go off air. We're going to take you to our post show. Kenan did raise an interesting issue with that. This is a broader situation in Africa. I want to talk a little bit more and get some thoughts about what's going on with this idea of aid on the continent. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Jeremy, for being with us. Ahmed as well. Go to stream.aljazeera.com to continue this conversation with us, and you can join it by tweeting us using the hashtag AJStream. We will see you online.